So I read this pretty interesting concept in the book, The Untethered Soul, and it was talking about how the voice inside your mind, it was sort of going over how it just sort of bounces around all over the place and how irrational it can be at times. So if you sit there and sort of observe your thoughts, I think you have to do it sort of like think about how your mind usually works. I find if I try to observe my thoughts, I'll just be thinking about observing my thoughts. But if you think about it, think about how your mind just sort of jumps around from subject to subject. So you'll be just going about your day, maybe driving or whatever, and you'll be thinking about a bill that you forgot to pay, and then you'll be thinking about how you're running late to something or something somebody said, and your mind is just like hopping around all these different things. And so like a couple of cool things that they talk about. Number one, they say that you aren't the voice that's in your head. You're the one that's listening to it, which is kind of like a weird thing to think about, but I don't know, it's interesting to me. But what I really liked about what they were saying is if you were to take the voice inside your head and externalize it, so imagine that voice inside your head is actually a person that's following you around all day and actually saying all the shit that's being said in your mind to you. Can you imagine like how chaotic your life would be if that person was just there all the time? So you're sitting there watching TV and this person is just sitting next to you going, "Hey, you forgot to pay the electric bill. It's going to be late," or you're supposed to call so-and-so, and just jumping around all these different subjects. Like that would just drive you totally crazy if somebody was literally there. And like for me, I struggle with this a lot, and it's been happening more and more lately. I've been pretty stressed out, so I'll wake up at like 3:30 in the morning, and then quick, that voice just starts up right away. So if you externalize that, that would mean that there's just a dude just sitting there waiting for me to wake up, and then as soon as I wake up, he just starts in on me. Oh, you got to pay attention to this, and you got to do this, and you do all this, and it just it's just crazy to think about, because even though it's crazy when you think if that was actually a person sitting there telling you, you still have all that shit happening. It's just happening inside your mind. So what I wanted to talk about was the practice of mindfulness, and it's not just some sort of hippie shit or whatever. I don't know, whatever your perception of it is. When you look at the idea of mindfulness, you could think about it on several levels. One, sort of the most obvious, would be meditation. So if you've never done meditation, there's a very simple way to do it. It's just you could set a timer on your phone for even 2 minutes or something, and just try to turn your attention to the breath. That's the first type of meditation I ever learned about, and it's just you just try to clear out the thoughts in your mind and try to just only focus on the sort of the air coming in and out of your nose, and just you could kind of dial in on different sensations and things like that in order to try to get your mind off of that sort of crazy fucker in there that's just going around subject to subject and doing all these kind of things. Gives yourself a little bit of a break. What I think a lot of people have trouble with is they try to jump in and do like a longer meditation session, or they'll sort of, and I do this, I don't do it as much anymore, but I did it in the beginning where you would, it's very hard to quiet your mind for probably the vast majority of people. So the concept is very simple, to focus on your breath, but I don't know. I think even the most experienced meditators still have to really focus on quieting that mind, and then you forget that you're meditating sometimes. So you'll be sitting there focusing on your breath, and then before you know it, your mind is just off doing its thing again, and you're like, "Oh shit, I'm meditating," and then you got to bring it back. So I think one of the keys is to not beat yourself up about it. Just recognize that your mind has wandered, and then bring it back. So if you wanted to really get into this, start small and don't beat yourself up about it, and do it very consistently. And then you can kind of incrementally step it up into, 10, 20-minute sessions if you're finding value in it. The reason I wanted to talk about it more than that, though, is practicing things like this. It gives you a tool to be able to quiet that voice when you need to. And that's what the biggest benefit for me was, because when I find myself in a really stressful situation and my mind is just going million miles an hour and it's just fucking off to the races, if I didn't have that meditation practice, I wouldn't have that tool that I can always go to when I really need to tell that fucker in my head to just shut the fuck up for a few minutes and let me just figure out what's going on, you know? So by practicing meditation, you'll be able to have that tool at your disposal to where you don't have to like go in a room with the lights off and close your eyes and set aside that time. Like you can use that tactic anytime you want when your mind is going in a direction that you don't want to go. So you could just be out walking around in the grocery store or whatever, and your mind starts getting crazy and you're starting to feel like you want to calm it down. You can be like, all right, just focus on your breath and just try to just focus on breathing, push all of your attention over to that. And I find that incredibly helpful, especially when I wake up at night and my brain just switches on and starts thinking about stuff. You know, it doesn't always work because it's easier said than done, but that's a tool that I know if I'm able to do that and I can quiet my mind, I can get back to sleep. There's also other ways to practice it, not just meditation. You can be mindful in anything that you do. So that'll also help you be able to clear out those thoughts in your mind and put your attention on whatever it is that you're doing. So I can't remember what book I was reading, but they were talking about you can be mindful in anything that you do. So say you're washing the dishes, you know, you don't have to focus on your breath. You can focus on 100% focus on the task that you're doing. So you could pay attention to the temperature of the water, pay attention to the suds and the way the sponge feels, like all of these kinds of things. It seems kind of weird, but it's like when you're doing those kind of mundane tasks, your brain is just going off wherever the fuck it wants to go. But if you were to focus your attention on that task, you can give yourself a little bit of a break from that. I've been trying to do this more in different aspects of my life. You know, like when I'm working out and stuff, I was always listening to podcasts and listening to audiobooks, and I started to think like I'm just like starting to feel like I'm just putting too much information in all the time, and I'm not really giving my brain any kind of rest time. So it's like I was on this path where I was like, I'd read every morning, and then as I'm kind of getting my day ready and drinking coffee and stuff, I'd be listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something. And then after a while, like all of this information just starts kind of blending together, and I can't remember who said this and what book that was in and all this. And so I started to think like maybe I need to just try to be present in the tasks that I'm doing. So when I do my morning workout, it's usually like 5:45 in the morning. I do it outside. And so lately I've been trying to put this mindfulness practice into that. And instead of listening to music or a podcast or audiobook, I'll just try to be present in what I'm doing. So I don't have anything playing. I'm just doing my thing. I'm feeling what the weight feels like in my hand. If I'm like walking or doing anything, I can focus my attention on one aspect of that. Like what is the sound of my feet hitting the cement or whatever it is, to just keep that practice. Because there may come a time that you really need that tool. You know, you may come to a part where you're so stressed out, you need something to calm that shit down. And it actually just happened to me this week. So, I mean, I've talked about being stressed out quite a few times, but it's never really manifested physically until this week. I think it was like on Tuesday, I had my first anxiety attack that I've ever had. I think I've gotten really stressed out before to where like it's sort of physically showed up, but this time it was like a full blown attack coming on, and it was crazy because like I'm sitting at my desk, and then my whole body starts tingling, and I'm like, what the fuck? What is that? Like that's never happened before. It was like that feeling when your leg falls asleep, but it was my whole body, and then that kind of made me nervous. So that was putting more stress into the mix. And then my breath started getting shorter and it was getting hard to breathe. And I was like, oh man, what the fuck is going on? So I stood up and then my legs were weak, and I was having trouble, not having trouble, but like my legs just felt a little wobbly. And then my brain's thinking about all this shit, and then I'm getting more stressed, and then it's building up, and the breath starts getting shorter. It gets harder to breathe, and then all of a sudden I start getting dizzy. Everything's looking woozy, and I'm like, "Oh man, what the fuck is going on?" And then my brain just starts taking over, and I'm looking around at my dogs, and I'm like, "Man, if I keel over right now, like what's going to happen to them, or should I call an ambulance? And if I call an ambulance, are they going to bust in the door, and then all my dogs are going to run out? Like, should I pass out in the front yard?" My brain's just starting to take over. But I'm also a really analytical person, so I start to like, in addition to all that sort of irrational stuff, which maybe it wasn't irrational, because if you're having a physical thing, I think these are normal things to think about. But at the same time, my analytical mind was like, all right, what the fuck really is going on? You've been really stressed out. You haven't been sleeping very well. All of this shit that's going on in your business. You're trying to do too many things. You're trying to do all this and that. This is anxiety. That's what this is. And I even read, there's a guy named Craig Ballantyne. I read one of his books, and I hope he's the one, as I'm talking about having too much information. I'm fairly certain that it was a Craig Ballantyne book. When he was talking about he had started having anxiety attacks, and it was similar. I guess everybody's anxiety attacks are different, but what I was experiencing was very similar, and a lot of the thoughts that he described were similar. Like, he thought he was dying, so he ended up going to the emergency room, I think multiple times. And so all of this is going on, and I'm like, you know what? I know that this is anxiety. Like, I'm super fucking healthy. I'm not having a heart attack. I eat healthy. I exercise every day. Not saying that those people can't have heart attacks, but I'm like, looking at all of the stress that's going on in my life, it's way more likely that I'm not having a heart attack, and it's way more likely that it's anxiety. It did get pretty close to where like I almost lost control, but the fact that I had those tools, that mindfulness, meditation and breathing practice and all these kind of things, these tools I feel like were what helped me sort of stop this thing before it got really bad. Cause I know that they get really bad. And I've heard people talk about them, and it didn't get to that point, but it was definitely on the way. And my mind was definitely pushing in that direction, but it was the mindfulness practice that I'd been doing. I think I started meditating in like 2009, maybe, or something like that. So I feel like I'm pretty good at it now. And obviously I'm not, well, not obviously, how do you know? But I don't do it like every single day, not like a monk style, like an hour and a half, or I don't know. Some of those dudes meditate like fucking, I don't know, like for ridiculous amounts of time. I don't do that, but I do practice it every day, and I don't necessarily set aside time for it, but it does pop up very frequently in my life. So when I do start to stress out about things, I just focus on the breath. That's my go-to tactic, because it's just the simplest thing. I don't know where to go from here. I sort of was winging it today. I'm running behind. It's a Saturday. I usually try to have these recorded, so I'm going to record and release this thing today. So I don't know where to go, where to go from here. But anyway, so I'll just wrap it up. I hope that's helpful. And if anybody's struggling with this kind of stuff and they want to talk about it, I'm not an expert by any means, but I think we can all kind of learn from each other. And actually, speaking on that, I'm putting a community together of people that are sort of like-minded. And I don't want to get too far into explaining it, but if you're interested in joining a community of people that are interested in bettering society, and our focus is on the graffiti culture, which is what this podcast is. We're trying to contribute to improving the graffiti culture by helping graffiti writers improve themselves, and it's mainly by sharing information like this. If you are on that sort of same path, or if this is of interest to you, please send me a message at bus166 on Instagram, and we can talk about it and see if it might be something you'd be interested in. All right, so I'm going to get out of here. Hope that was helpful, and have a good day. All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.